Morning, everybody. Welcome back. So, back from my trip to Montreal and ready to go. I think it was 2 weeks back. I did a few technique-based, or one technique-based demo where I showed chamisa, but also grasses. So I've decided I want to paint this scene here. Beautiful. I mean, it looks like almost a marsh scene from New England. It looks very reminiscent of a lot of the scenes I've painted in Maine and Massachusetts. But this is Wyoming. This is in the Grand Teton National Park. This is the scene on my iPad. What you'll notice, there's actually a fairly distinct difference between the two. This is much warmer. There's a lot more orange and pinks in these grasses. Let me just notice that may not be the exact same photo. I mean, it'll work either way because it's so similar. Yeah, it's just slightly different. I just noticed it because, this is cropped a little bit higher. This has the grass coming off here, whereas this has the grass continuing to about here, that main body of grass. When I look at them, I mean, this is more dramatic. Maybe this has a little bit clear, perspective line. I don't know. We'll see when I do the block in, we'll see which direction I take it. But the color is very, very different. This is much warmer. So it looks like basically this is the same scene. I just zoomed it in because this also has a little bit of this blue sky above, whereas this basically has the clouds going all the ways up to, sorry, you're probably getting a little reflection. This has the clouds going all the ways up to the top border of the scene. So what I'm going to do for the demonstration, I haven't used that pale vermilion in a while for you, so I'm going to do a block in with pale vermilion and then not even wet it with alcohol, do the block in and then jump right in with dry pastel. In the workshop in Montreal this weekend, I actually did a pale vermilion block in, then with local color. I did that kind of underpainting, and it worked out really well for this sort of beautiful kind of sunset scene that I did, getting that glowing light. So it was really fun to do it again, because I haven't used that technique much lately. It used to be kind of my go-to, but I really haven't spent nearly as much time using it in the past, say, like year and a half, 2 years, but could be a good time to revisit. I think maybe I'll have the grass come up right about here. So this is water reflection, which is a little bit on the darker side, a little bit darker than the grass itself. And then the grass kind of comes up kind of like that. There's like a little dam here. I actually think it's like a true beaver dam. I'm not going to include that. To me, it's actually distracting and really unclear what's happening there. So I don't think there's any benefit in including that. So I won't. So using this to create a block in, a value map block in for the scene, I have, and this line here really does come up like that. And there's a little bit more of a shadow here. And if I really want to set up the value relationships, I need to make sure this water goes dark enough. And basically, right from the get-go, I want to make sure that this is working compositionally. and value relationship wise. So I'm already establishing that here. And then, there's this stand of trees, which I really want to simplify. And I need to have that bottom edge defined. So the bottom edge comes down, kind of that bottom shadow edge comes down right above. There's actually some darks sitting back here. There's this, and then, you can kind of get an indication that this is curving back here because you get a little bit of a shadow, these shadow areas, and then you kind of actually see water peeking through, so that could be nice to include, that indication of the water peeking. So that's this. Just trying to make sure I keep my place so I know where I am in all of this. I have this really simplified, looking at a single mass. Could have, a few of these nice little distant trees back there. And then there are some trees up here, which I do want to include. I want to actually include some trees on this right-hand side to balance out all those left-hand sided trees. There are some little bits of darker shadows in here. I wonder, I think what I need to do to get a little bit better sense of balance, include some trees over here. Does that work? I don't know if that works. Those might be too big. That right-handed side, those trees might be a little bit too big. I can correct for that though. But I think it would be nice to have something here to balance out that mass. So these are the kind of, edits you would want to be thinking about compositionally, say in a scene like this. The scene almost never gives you exactly everything you need. You can get close, there's no doubt. Some scenes will be really, really close to giving you all of the necessary information, but it doesn't give you everything here. So just trying to put a little bit of this almost everywhere. Even, definitely in some of the lightest areas, if we want to get that orange glow to come through a little bit. Okay. I think that's sufficient. What's that, about 6-7 minutes in, maybe 5 minutes of actual blocking in, and I think I have enough information. Again, maybe this actually doesn't come up quite so high, but I think it's something here dark to balance out this weight, and this weight would be good. So without further ado, we will jump right in. So I know this is going to look really far off, but I actually see a little bit of that green in there. And I want to put that in before I start to bring in, some blues and some nice violet colors. And even this early on, I could start to indicate some kind of interesting mark. So this is kind of like the negative painting to show where some of those grasses are. So something like that. And the blue in both, the photograph and in the print the blue's pretty intense, and I do think, I'll be honest, I do think the camera exaggerates it a little bit. This is a gorgeous, schminky blue-violet color here. Yeah, I like that. So alternating these vertical and horizontal marks to kind of fracture the color in here. That may be about enough of that. I can soften it. And I'm continuing the gradation as we head back. As we head back further into the scene, that gradation obviously in value and intensity kind of diminishes a bit. Trying to find the right value and intensity. So let's say I can still work on this transition, but this seems like a nice, seems kind of like a nice color in here. And I'm putting the water in here because if I establish the water, I can then paint the grass in the foreground over it. Let's see, this color may actually work a little bit in the sky. So there's clouds in here. I can start to look at, what value and color do I want some of these clouds to be? And I want to go in and establish some of the deep warms in the background grasses in those shadow areas. Meaning in here. And I'm indicating, just like I did in that little technique-based demo, I'm not painting this as a continuous line. It really should be a broken line. So that's how it will appear in reality. And this kind of angles a little bit. This is more of a violet. I wonder if I could use a tiny bit of this. I definitely want to go cooler back there. Let's say we start to actually incorporate some greens. Pretty cool green happening back here, and I wonder, it's kind of intense, but I'm wondering if that could be kind of a placeholder for those greens back there. Because I do want them to sit behind this, given how small they are. Might be a little on the intense side, but that's okay. Again, it's functioning as basically a placeholder. So this is a little bit of a lighter value. And I want to be sure that there's a nice balance of color temp. I don't want to push everything so warm. That just won't work out. I know I kind of talk about color temp ad nauseum, but it's so critical. I'm really piecing everything together. You know, I'm not trying to finish any specific area of the painting at once. I'm really just slowly building up. You know, you start to see some more vibrant, kind of more intense greens up here. Maybe you do see a little here. I won't say this is a dominant color though, I don't really think it is. See some of these oranges. Let's do some work in the sky. So spent a total of maybe 20 seconds on the sky. Let's start to bring that up a little bit. Keep the whole painting moving along together. Now there are some darker kind of cloud shapes, sort of shadow cloud shapes in some areas, which works really quite well with that blue. You know, I definitely see some pink in the sky. How pink does that go? I don't know. Now here's a schminky pink that I don't think I've used before. Nice blue in here. I'm thinking about this really abstractly. You know, abstract shapes. vary this sky blue a little bit. So again, working all over this scene, little bit by bit. I'm digging through some of my new pastels now. Looking for some slightly cooler greens. It's not all that cool. And then in that background hill, on the right hand side, like this hill has some nice violets in it. So I want to start to indicate those violets. I feel like if this goes too high, this just feels like this really kind of big shoulder almost. So I don't want that to be so high. So what I can do, use some sky color, bring that back down to earth a little bit. You know, I've done a fair number of scenes like this, and they're, you know, composition obviously is important, but there's so much about color balance. And how do we paint all of these grasses without painting a million little grasses? Like, those are the two things these scenes are really so much about. You know, and do you want it to be, you know, yellow dominant? Do you want it to be warm green dominant? Do you want the fields to be pink dominant? Like, these are all kind of the questions you have to ask yourself with these scenes. Where are we? Yeah, about 20 minutes in. I need to develop the color in the background trees on the right now. There's some nice bit of warmth in there. You know, this is a fall scene, so you're going to see warm. You know, we think that's kind of back there, but it's really not that far in the background. So really using the texture of the paper as my aid to get texture in these grasses. So this pushes it a little bit more towards pink. It's not a true pink, it's actually a little bit orangey, but it reads as slightly pink because it has a tad more red in it than that yellow color did. Beautiful blue color back here. Kind of like a background hill. And I can say it as, simply as that. I don't need to overdo that, overwork it, spend too much time on it. Really abstracted, which I'm liking. I really like that abstract effect. I'm not ready really for finishing marks, but I can start to indicate where some of those finishing marks might go. So hopefully you can see it really kind of, the different areas start to kind of coalesce and come together. I'm trying to think what color that goes to. It actually goes like to a pretty light, kind of neutral straw color. Now, what color is that? That's a big question. That's not an easy color to find and to paint, but let's say, does it go maybe not quite that light? I think I see a fair bit of this color in here. That's still reading pretty light, so I don't want it to go that light yet. Could we this is a nice orange. I think we could put a little bit of this orange in here. Likewise, I see some of it in these. Notice how any specific color I'm picking up, I'm not painting a bunch of individual grasses with that color, but if I do, 3 or 4 individual marks with each color as I pick them up, you'll start to see all of those little marks work together. If that makes sense. I'm not taking one color and making, 45,000 little grass marks. With each color, there'll be a few little grass marks, just a couple. On that background hill over here, it's still a tad on the dark side. There's still a whole lot of texture left, a ton of tooth left in this scene. I mean, I'm not even close, like nowhere close to filling the tooth, which is a good thing. I like to have that freedom to sort of add and modify color as I see fit. And if you fill the tooth too quickly, you lose that ability. This is pretty intense. I don't know, this may be too intense. Yeah, I think that's too orange. So it's not that orange, maybe it's more on the pinky orange side. Maybe a little bit of this. It's not too far off a color I already used. It may not actually be saturated enough. So I'm searching. This has a little bit more red in it. I'm wondering if I can just lay in more of this golden color that I've already used. Treat that as a little bit more of a dominant color in this scene as I continue to build things up. Yeah, I think that works okay. Coming together. Slowly but surely, we're building this up. Putting some cooler color back here in some of these shadows. You know, there's a shorter, almost like stand of bushes in front of those big ones. So I'm trying to indicate kind of where those are. And I could even, put a little bit of a shadow under those trees. I like the cool back here. I think it's a really necessary addition to balance out all that warmth. Nice. Yeah, I like the way this is coming along. Let me take a step back. This needs to go lighter, and it needs to relate better to the other color in the painting. So to me, that's just feeling too violet. Even though there is violet in there, it needs to relate better to what I've already done in the scene. So that was a case of right there, the schminky not having a good edge on it because I haven't used it. So I basically got a couple lines where the pastel sticks out, which actually happens a decent amount with newer pastels. I want to go a little bit yellower. There are actually some decently light. Ooh, that's not right. That's too lemony. It has to be a much warmer yellow. I would have considered that just far too cool. And this is indicating the little field of grass sitting in front of that hill. These subtle value shifts are so important. I read a quote the other day on Instagram, and I forget who it was quoting, but it basically, Sergei Bongart. Basically, the take-home message was, spend about 90% of your time painting, correcting shapes and values, and you're only, looking about the last 10% of the painting where you're getting into all the kind of juicy mark making and all of that stuff. spend the vast majority of your time slowly building up the color and the value relationships, making sure the shapes work, the composition works, before you start getting into the sort of the mark making and the detail. So I found that to be really, really insightful. And something that I already kind of do and think about, but it's always good to hear at another time. I'm gonna start working on that back edge. You know, the grass is right next to the water. You do see some lighter value here in the reflection of the grasses. So I'm starting to indicate that a little bit. See how soft that edge is too? Very, very, very soft edge. And you can start to see, like I mentioned before, you can start to see the water head back in this direction. So, the time where I pull out my trusty new pastels, which I'll start using a little bit more as I create some more kind of interesting details and textures here. And then I see it start, let's see, where is this? So maybe it's starting to come over here. You know, there's a little bit of paper preserved there, not intentionally, it just happened to be there. I could use that. Cool green I use in the background. Need a better transition value there in the water. Going again back to my new pastels. Yeah, so this is a better value transition. I want to take the slightly darker value a little bit higher into the water, just a tad higher. And I'm going to paint more sort of pink and violet in the water. I see those reflections of the clouds, and I want to make sure those play a more prominent role, which they do in the scene. This one got kind of boxed in. You know, I can pull out some nice violet color too. You know, there's definitely a violet I painted in the sky, so why not, you know, continue it in the water? start to indicate a few bits of grass, not much. I see more cool. Now that I notice it, I want to paint it. So I definitely see more cool in these shadow areas. And I need to paint that cool. That cool will really help to balance out all the warms that I'm now putting in here. Again, this is relatively cool. It's not, you know, if you just looked at it in isolation, you may not consider it strictly a cool color, but I see it as cool compared to these other colors. Put a little bit of it back here. See some more golds in these trees. Talked about pink. Almost always in these yellow and orange dominant scenes, add some pink. You're going to see it in there, and it sort of helps to, I think, create much better color harmony and much more balance in color. Yeah, I like that pink a lot, which means maybe, why not put a little bit of it in the sky? I could use a little bit kind of a lighter, slightly lighter violet in here. Take another step back. Look at it as a whole. Creating some implied detail, you know, with negative painting. Trying to open this up a little bit more here. You know, it's, I said, you know, before I started this, I need to try to find that right balance down here. Looking for another stick that I could use to clean up some of what's happening back here, because I feel like I need to get that top, you know, that top edge of light on some of this. This should help me get there. Trying to correct some of those shapes. And that can all be very, very soft. I don't need any hard edges. I don't need to over explain what's happening there. I feel like I can lighten some of that reflection in the grass. So this grass reflection, it does go even a little bit lighter. So let's start to indicate that. Soften some of those edges a little bit. I have this pink violet color here again. That's a beautiful color, and I'd like to have a little bit more in the scene. Kind of thinking through some of the colors I see here. There's some interesting blues that kind of come right down here. A little bit more pink in the sky. I like that pink. What I kind of hope you're noticing is when I started with that really warm underpainting, it's kind of ensuring that I'm maintaining a nice balance of color temps and I'm not pushing this, say, too cool, but I'm finding a nice variety of color that works in the scene. And it's popping through in some really interesting ways, and I want to make sure that that persists. I don't want to lose all of that. Ah, dang it. Wasn't really happy about that. And the scene's obviously taking you back to this area. Could do a little bit in here too, but if I want to use my reference as inspiration, I can play up a little bit what's happening back there. That yellow is too yellow because this is really more pink dominant. I think I can still push the oranges a little bit more in the grasses, so I want to find a color that's really going to work. That might work. Where am I on time? About 50 minutes, which makes sense. So this is a 9x12, 50 minutes feels about right. This is a nice color. So I feel like this is a color that can bring more orange in the scene, but not be completely over the top. Close. And I want to maintain a really fresh effect here, so I'm not going to go in and hopefully overwork this thing. So I'm going to bring in a little bit more cool green in the foreground to relate to all the cool green in the background. Just a tiny bit. Still very dominantly warm up here, but a little bit of cool is nice so that it relates better. And that there's a nice kind of harmony throughout. Yeah, I think this is working. I think I'm pretty much ready to leave it as is. And I think there's perspective is captured nicely. I could maybe include a little bit of a water indication over here. So let me do that. And then I'm pretty much ready to call it. What I want to do though is I want to put a shadow color indicating the back bank so that when I put the little bit of water in front it makes sense. But it has to be the right value and the right color temp. Maybe it could be, I've used this shadow color in some of those other areas. It's going to be dark in the field though, that's my only concern. Yeah, it's going to be, I think, too dark in the field. Maybe I can use that warm violet. Red's intense. I think I could tone that down a bit. Trying to decide what color to use to tone it down. Maybe. All right, guys. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that was helpful, in terms of how to, capture a lot of those, the grasses. Again, only a couple indications of actual grass marks. The rest of it is really focusing on shape and value, trying to get a really nice sort of subtle variation in the colors, creating, harmonious color using some oranges, some yellows, some pinks, some kind of warm violets, mostly keeping it in the warm color temp, but also like some of these cooler pink colors just help to balance out all of that warmth. I think again, nice feeling of perspective heading back. These cool colors should really recede. Yeah, that's it, guys. So I'll get this posted today. It's Friday. Happy painting. Take care. Bye.